Welcome to the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast, your weekly dose of accounting and tax tips specific to small business owners. You will be on your way to growing your business and paying the least amount in taxes as legally possible. Here's your host, Mike Jesowshek, CPA.
Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today's topic is filing an extension a bad thing, and what do I need to know about tax extensions? I am your host, Mike Jesowshek, and one housekeeping note before we get started, just a reminder, we have our free webinar coming up on May 4th, and the webinar is the 2022 Tax Strategies to ensure that business owners pay the least amount possible. Do not forget to sign up for this webinar. Go to taxsavingspodcast.com/webinar. Again, today's topic is filing an extension a bad thing, and what do I need to know about tax extensions? Now, we're really getting close to that time of the year where a tax extension is going to be an important thing to think about, especially as we're coming near the deadlines of both some businesses as well as a personal return coming up. And one thing that we've noticed through our Facebook group and things like that is that there is so much misinformation about tax extensions out there. So what I want to do today is just take the time to smooth out those details and go through what you need to know about tax extensions. Now, the first question and the most commonly asked one is filing an extension a bad thing? And we hear from so many business owners that they were told not to file an extension because it's going to increase their risk for an audit. And this could not be further from the truth. Filing an extension has nothing to do with your risk of an audit. In fact, sometimes it can actually avoid an IRS audit because there might be some tax documents that take longer to get delivered or never formally get delivered. And by extending, it just buys you more time to make sure that you get all those necessary tax documents that may be wandering out there still. Also, you also have the ability to request a transcript. So the IRS, you can go right on the IRS website, request a transcript, and that transcript is going to get a listing of every form the IRS received related to your Social Security number. So with an extension, you can request a transcript, see what types of forms and all the data that the IRS has received on you, and you can ensure that way that you're not missing anything. So filing an extension has nothing to do with your risk of an audit, and in fact, sometimes it can actually help you out. Now, there's a few items that we want to consider when we're thinking about that. First, and most importantly, you must file your extension before the deadline. You have to file that extension on time. And the second piece, which is equally as important, is an extension of time to file your taxes, but not pay your taxes. Your taxes are still due on the normal due date of the tax return. So if you're extending, we highly recommend that you include a rough estimate with your extension of the tax that you expect to be owed. That makes sure that you're going to stop the bleeding on any kind of interest or penalties on that. So again, an extension is an extension of time to file your taxes, but not pay your taxes. When you file that extension, if you are expecting a tax liability that you're going to have to pay, make sure you include a rough estimate to just get that payment off to the governments. If you have successfully filed an extension on time, then just make sure you're filing your final return by the extended deadline. So let's talk about that. What are the extension deadlines for tax year 2022? And let's talk about the form that you would use for that. Now, when we look at extending a tax return, there is different types of tax returns that we can extend. You might have a business tax return that you're extending or your personal. So if you're operating as an S corporation or a partnership, the last date to successfully file an extension is March 15th of 2022. And this is for S corporations and partnerships. And you're going to use Form 7004. If you have successfully filed an extension, your final due date for those returns are going to be September 15th of 2022. If you're operating as a C corporation, that extension is going to be due by April 18th of 2022. Again, you're going to use Form 7004. And the final due date with a successful extension for a C corporation is going to be October 17th of 2022. Now, for your personal return, and this includes those of you that might have Schedule C businesses. So your personal return, including Schedule C businesses, if you're going to extend, that must be filed by April 18th of 2022. And for this one, you're going to actually use Form 4868. Form 4868 for your personal return. Then the final due date for those personal return extensions is going to be October 17th of 2022. So again, S Corps and partnerships, extension is due by March 15th. C Corporation and your personal tax returns, that extension is due by April 18th of 2022. Now, the next question we often hear is, and this usually happens after the extension deadline occurs, but the question is, what happens if I do not file an extension? And so if you missed an extension deadline, or for whatever reason chose not to file an extension, but still did not file your return, you're going to have some penalties. And again, this is going to change depending on the type of return that you have. So the penalties for an S corporation for an unfiled return with no extension or anything else is going to be $210 per month per shareholder. So if you have 2 shareholders, that's $420 per month that return has not been filed. With a partnership, same thing, $210 per month per partner for each month that return was not filed. So it's important that you either for sure extend the return or file the return, because otherwise it starts clicking the clock starts ticking on these penalties that you're going to be facing. Now, a penalty for a C corporation is going to be 5% of the unpaid tax for each month with a maximum of 25%. Same thing with your personal. The penalty is going to be 5% of the unpaid tax for each month, up to 25% of the unpaid tax. Now, there are some penalties that you can request relief from if this is maybe the first time that you filed a return late or something like that, but I wouldn't want to depend on this, and so that's what we're just saying, get ahead of it. If you need to file an extension, just make sure you file that extension on time and then file your eventual return on time. Filing an extension is a very easy process to do, so just make sure you're taking advantage of it. All right, so some important items and some recap on this extension idea. Filing an extension does not increase your risk for an audit. I cannot say that enough. Filing an extension does not increase your risk for an audit. But just make sure that you file your extension on time by the extension deadline. So make sure you're hitting those extension deadlines. Again, for a partnership and an S corporation, those are going to be due by March 15th. For a C corporation and your personal return, including Schedule C businesses, those extensions are due by April 18th. If you then extended your return and you're looking at when do we have to actually file the actual return by, for an S corporation and partnership, if you successfully extended, it's September 15th. And for a C corp and your personal returns, that's October 17th. Now, if you successfully filed your extension again, just make sure you do the final filing before the eventual due date. And again, the biggest thing we talk about extensions is an extension is simply extending your time to file. Any taxes owed are still due on the regular due date, and you could face interest or penalties if those are paid after the due date. So if you're extending, just be sure to include a payment to the IRS with an estimate of what you expect your tax bill to be. It's better to just get something out there, something to stop the bleeding on that. If you're like, I cannot afford to pay your tax bill or need to know where to go to make that payment of that with that extension, check out our blog and podcast. We did an episode a couple weeks back about what options do I have to pay for my tax bill. So check that one out. Again, the idea behind this is just making sure that we want to make sure you're aware of the extension, include any payment you can with it, and just make sure you're filing everything on time. So hopefully that was helpful. I wanted to put this out around this time of the year because I know in 2 weeks we have those S Corps and partnership returns coming due, and then next month we have those personal returns and C corporations coming due or where their extensions are due. So I wanted to make sure you have this ahead of time. I want to thank you again for listening to another episode. A reminder to join our free Facebook group, ask questions that you have. We're here to help you along this journey of being an entrepreneur, and there's many other business owners in there. They're on the same journey as you. Just go into Facebook, type in Small Business Tax Secrets. I also want to remind you that if you love what we're doing on this podcast, we take it even further as part of our tax minimization program. You can join our tax minimization program at taxsavingspodcast.com/tax. Within there, we have all sorts of tax strategies, implementation guides, walking you through how to implement all these different tax saving strategies to make sure that you pay the least amount in taxes as legally possible. We also have monthly group training where we deep dive on specific topics. And one of my favorite parts of it is with a membership into our tax minimization program, you have unlimited access to our team. You have unlimited access to us to ask those general tax and accounting questions. So think of it almost as having an accountant in your back pocket. If you are not a member yet, join our tax minimization program at taxsavingspodcast.com/tax. And that's all I have for this week. I want to thank you again for listening to another episode, and I will see you all next week.
This has been another episode of the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast. If you enjoy our weekly episodes, please leave a review and share with other business owners. You can find previous episodes and more information at www.taxsavingspodcast.com. Thanks for listening and have a great day.